rich, hearty chili made with the best ground venison, onion, chilies, spices, and of course, beans, served up hot and topped with sour cream, green onion, or whatever you like. Of course, I'm talking about my, quote, famous venison chili. And I use the word my kind of loosely because I don't really consider this my recipe, so to speak. It actually is almost entirely derived from the chili recipe that I grew up having that my dad made. And by the way, as an adult, he actually mentioned that his chili recipe came almost entirely from my mom's mom, my grandma, his mother-in-law. He modified it a little bit, and in the time since I've been making it, I've modified it a little bit, and it's ended up with what I consider to be the best and my favorite chili recipe ever, anywhere. It's not to say that it's going to be everybody's favorite chili recipe. People get pretty particular about chili recipes and styles. For example, it's a tomato-y based chili, but I don't use diced tomato or any other kind of really whole intact tomatoes. I use tomato juice. I know it can be very common to have hunks and bits of tomato mixed into the chili, and that's just not the flavor or texture that I grew up with, so it's not what I've come to expect out of a chili. And for my southern viewers, particularly Texas, yes, this is a northern chili. This is a Yankee, northern Michigan chili. And of course, that means a couple things. One, it's going to have ground meat in it, not chopped up pieces of steak. And two, it has beans in it. Northern chili, also according to the internet, sometimes referred to as home-style chili. It's going to have beans in it. Unless we're talking about chili dog chili, which is more of a chili sauce and not really the same thing as chili, but now we're getting into a whole different category of debate. I have no idea how long I've been rambling in this intro, so I better stop here and we're going to get right into taking a look at the meat we're going to grind up for what I'm calling my Michigan Northern home-style venison chili. The first thing I'm going to do is get my venison ground up. If you've been watching these venison videos lately, you've seen me do this a bunch of times already, so I won't spend too much time on it. I'm just going to run some cut up chunks of meat that came from a venison shoulder roast through the grinder. I'm using the coarse grind plate, so I have some nice meaty pieces of ground venison in my chili. For a batch this size, I need 2 pounds of that ground meat. And before I start cooking anything, I need to do just a little more prep work. First, chop up some onions. I'm using yellow onions, white would work fine too. I need 3.5 cups of chopped onion, which ends up being about 3 medium-sized yellow onions. Then I need 4 or 5 cloves of fresh garlic, minced or pressed. Today, I felt like using the garlic press. Finally, 1 jalapeno. I'll remove the seeds and give it a pretty fine chop. Now we're at the stove, and I'm going to get some olive oil heating up in my large enamel Dutch oven. If you don't have a Dutch oven, you can use a stock pot or similar. When the oil is good and hot, I'm dumping in all that meat. I'll let it start browning, moving it around with the wooden spoon every minute or two. And when it's almost fully browned, but not quite, I'll throw in the onions. Yes, this is a pretty oniony recipe, but it is so good, and they do not end up overpowering the chili. And I'll also add in the chopped jalapeno at this point. Mix it all together pretty well and let it cook for a few minutes until the onion and jalapeno start to soften. You may see a fair amount of liquid in the pot, and that's basically all water releasing from the vegetables and also some from the venison. If you were using beef, it would also release a lot of fat that you wouldn't necessarily want in there. In that case, I recommend straining most of the grease out before moving on to the next step, but for my super lean venison, I'm not straining anything. While that's all cooking, let's get our spice mixture ready. You could use a couple packets of store-bought chili seasoning mix like Chilio or McCormick's, but as usual, homemade is better. After years of experimentation, this is my absolute go-to chili seasoning mix. Chili powder, cayenne pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, cumin, dry parsley, kosher salt, black pepper, and white sugar. Mix it all together and it's ready to use. Check out the recipe link in the video description for this seasoning mix recipe. Now I'll add the minced garlic into the pot and let that cook for about a minute. Then I'm taking all that seasoning and pouring it into the pot. Stir everything very well to get the meat and vegetables completely and evenly coated. And now we just let everything cook for about 5 minutes. Now, I've made this recipe possibly more than any other recipe that I've ever featured on this channel. In fact, every winter I tend to make 2 or 3 huge batches of it to freeze to eat throughout the season. And aside from just how delicious and hearty and satisfying it is to eat, something that I really love about making this recipe is how easy it is. Half of this thing just involves opening up some cans of things and dumping them into a pot. Yeah, there's some fresh vegetables and some things we have to chop, but it all comes together so quickly, and the end product that's the result of such little work never ceases to amaze me because of just how delicious it is. And there's not many things that I can say that I actively crave eating that were made of mostly easy canned ingredients. And now to add in the rest of those ingredients: 2 cans of red kidney beans, including the liquid, 1 of these little cans of mild green chilies, about 2/3 of a can of fire roasted corn. I have also used corn that I've roasted myself, which tastes great, but canned works fine. Give that all a preliminary stir, and then in goes a 46-ounce can of tomato juice. Another good mix with a wooden spoon. And now I'm going to bring everything up to a simmer and let it simmer on low heat for 45 minutes. And I'll partially cover the pot in case of spattering, but I do want to let the steam escape as it simmers. After 45 minutes, I'm turning off the heat, and there's just one more thing to do. Right now the consistency is pretty thin, and I like it to have just a little more body to it. So I'm going to make a simple slurry by mixing 3 tablespoons of cornstarch with 3 tablespoons of cold water. Pour that mixture into the chili and stir it in. Over the next couple minutes, the chili will thicken up a little bit. Now it's just how I like it, and it's time to serve. Finish it with any sort of toppings you like. Today, I'm feeling like some simple sour cream and chopped green onion. And finally, a taste. I gotta have another. I've made this chili recipe so many times, I didn't really even need to do the taste test because I already knew how much I was going to love it and how delicious it was about to be. But how could I resist having a couple of bites? As I said, this is exactly what I've come to expect a chili to taste like. The spices and seasonings, the texture, the consistency, all the flavors and the way they kind of blend together. I use a lot of tomato juice as the base liquid, but it's not overly tomatoey. It just really accentuates all those other flavors in such a nice way. And I've said before that I am not somebody who can handle a lot of spiciness. I am on the very low end of spice tolerance. That being said, I consider this chili recipe to be kind of near the upper threshold of the amount of heat that I can handle. Definitely has a little bit of something going on my tongue and the back of my throat, but not so much that it makes it painful or unenjoyable for someone like me. And if you want more heat, add in more jalapeno, add in even more cayenne pepper. And if you can't handle any heat whatsoever, leave those ingredients out or replace the jalapeno with something like poblano, which really has no heat at all, but a nice flavor. Now, a few years ago, I made a video kind of similar to this one in which I showed how to make my turkey chili. And that turkey chili recipe was basically identical to this recipe, except we swapped out the protein. So I already wrote out the full recipe and put it on my website way back then. So if you want to take a look at the recipe for how I made this venison chili, take a look in the video description below for a link to the recipe that I kind of already did a couple years back. The exact same recipe, you can use whatever protein you want. I used to use turkey a lot, but now I've come to basically exclusively use venison because I think it's the best in that chili and probably a lot of chilies. In any case, a very lean meat, in my opinion, works best for this chili recipe. Anyway, be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future cooking videos and venison videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, this is Great Lakes Prepping.